The moment Senator Durbin revealed what happened inside that preschool, the entire chamber froze. It wasn't just disturbing. It was the kind of story that forces you to question how far government power is willing to go when it believes no one is watching. Because what happened under Kristi Noem's DHS wasn't an accident, wasn't a misunderstanding, and definitely wasn't about public safety. It was the clearest sign yet that the people in charge of these raids stopped caring about the difference between enforcing the law and traumatizing communities. For months, Chicago had been living under the shadow of Operation Midway Blitz, a campaign advertised as a crackdown on dangerous criminals.
On the ground, the reality of the situation paints a dramatically different picture. As part of these immigration raids, agents, ICE agents and others, have baselessly rounded up and disappeared people on the streets and in homes across the city, almost all of whom had no prior warrants or criminal history. Terrorists? That's not the case at all. I want to speak to you about one of the incidents that I ran across when I went back home last week. 2 weeks ago, a viral video showed federal agents storming through the doors of Rayito del Sol, daycare and preschool center in the North Center neighborhood of Chicago. These ICE agents, in their camouflage uniforms and with masks on their face, were dragging out a teacher while she screamed and cried, "I have papers," in Spanish. That teacher's name is Diana Santayana, but her students, little girls and boys, between the age of 6 months and 6 years, know her as Miss Diana. According to school officials, Diana had an authorization to work, and agents did not present a warrant when they entered the building. This is the Meet the Teacher flyer for Miss Diana that's posted in the classrooms of Rayito del Sol. This was the woman that the ICE agents went into the school and daycare center and arrested. The flyer describes Diana's love of early education and working with kids because, quote, "It's one of the most rewarding experiences," in her words, and she likes to nurture and leave a mark on young ones. Does this look like one of the rapists, murderers, terrorists, criminally insane that President Trump has reminded us of over and over again? Of course not. Thankfully, Miss Diana was released from detention after a judge ruled her mandatory detention was illegal. They swooped her up out of this daycare center. She disappeared and no one could find her. Not family, friends, no one could find her. And then she turned up in a facility, I believe, in Indiana, and they released her from there. What was this all about? Well, I'll tell you what it was all about. It was about the reign of terror, which this Operation Midway Blitz is visiting on the city of Chicago. Following her release, Diana said, quote, "I love our community and the children I teach, and I can't wait to see them again." Does that sound like a terrorist rant? I know they can't wait to see her. They love Miss Diana. But this incident has rattled the community in Chicago, especially the kids who attend Rayito del Sol, who range in age, from, as I mentioned, from 6 months to 6 years. This past week, I visited with the parents of some of these students. About 12 of them met. They, of course, expressed concerns for her because they love her. Miss Diana is well loved by all these kids. They also worried about the impact of this incident on their kids. The questions and the nightmares that followed as these little ones were forced to see and hear the administration's brutality in full view. In an interview later, after the incident took place, one of the parents, Tara, said, and I quote, "The families were traumatized. Children were crying, and the scene was one none of us ever witnessed before and will never forget. It is outrageous that children are exposed to this, but the Trump administration basically doesn't give a damn. There used to be a time when ICE didn't cross certain lines. DHS had policies against enforcement at schools and churches for this very reason. Not anymore. They've got to go after terrorists like Miss Diane, and so they have to break all of the rules that have been established. President Trump has touted Operation Midway Blitz as a resounding success. But these raids aren't targeted. The administration is swooping up people off the streets, while they're dropping off their kids at school or heading to work, or simply looking Hispanic, good enough to be arrested and deported. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what U.S. District Court Judge Jeffrey Cummings said. In a lawsuit challenging warrantless immigration arrest in Illinois, Judge Cummings read from a summary he and his law clerks compiled of more than 150 pending immigration cases in which arrestees were challenged their deportation. The judge said the circumstances of the arrest show that Operation Midway Blitz is not targeting hardened criminals, not targeting the worst of the worst. In that case, the Trump administration provided a list of more than 600 individuals detained during Midway Blitz. By their own data, just 16 of the 1,600 detainees have any criminal history that poses a high risk to public safety. Do you know what percentage that is, Mr. President? Less than 3%. Terrorists, rapists, murderers, criminally insane. Less than 3% have any criminal background. All of this confirms what I've been saying for months. What is happening in Chicago with Midway Blitz is a political theater to spread fear, not reduce crime. Oh, they struck fear in the hearts of the kids at this daycare center. They may never forget what they saw that day when the agents came in their camouflage and their mask and whisked this poor woman out to deport her and started off by sending her to Indiana and then releasing her. It made no sense whatsoever. This is political theater at its worst. Chicago deserves better. America deserves better. Reports indicate Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino is leaving the city of Chicago. Let me tell you, he couldn't leave too soon for my conclusion. However, we expect immigration raids to continue in the city. And Mr. Bovino has already taken his administration's brutal tactics that they've been practicing in Chicago to Charlotte, North Carolina. In just one weekend, DHS agents raided a church and arrested at least one U.S. citizen simply because he looked Hispanic. In Mr. Bovino's own words, and I quote, "It wouldn't surprise me to see us in a city near you." So I ask my colleagues, especially my Republican friends who value liberty and freedom as much as I do, what is stopping this government from deploying tear gas in your home city? What is stopping them from pointing guns at your constituents? What is arresting your fellow neighbors without cause mean to you in the future? It's a legitimate question. Don't look the other way out of personal or political loyalty to this president. Look straight in the eyes of the people you represent and tell them you stand for the Constitution and the well-worn history of this country where we have tried to push back when tyrants emerge. It's on all of us to call out these abuses of powers and this trampling of civil liberties. How can we say to Miss Diana, we're sorry? We can say it by ending Midway Blitz as fast as possible and by reassuring the families there that we want to have a safe nation, but not at the expense of our basic liberties. I yield.
The speeches were dramatic, the worst of the worst, the threats hiding in neighborhoods, the villains supposedly lurking around every corner. But when Durbin went home and actually talked to families caught in the middle of it, he didn't find villains. He found parents terrified to drop their kids off at school, communities afraid to answer their doors, and children too young to understand why their world suddenly felt unsafe. And then there was the video. That video changed everything. Picture this. A group of toddlers, some barely old enough to speak, sitting inside their classroom. A daycare decorated with bright posters, toys, and storybooks. A place designed to feel safe. A place where the outside world isn't supposed to come crashing in. And then masked agents in camouflage gear burst through the doors like they were raiding a criminal hideout. No warrant. No explanation. No hesitation. Just chaos to eye in the middle of the screaming and confusion. They grabbed a woman the kids called Miss Diana, a teacher whose only crime was showing up to work that morning. A teacher with legal authorization, a clean record, and a history of caring for kids during some of the most important years of their lives. She shouted, "I have papers," as they dragged her away, but it didn't matter. To them, she wasn't a person. She was a target, and the children watched. They watched her cry. They watched strangers in masks take her. They watched their safe space become a battlefield. One parent later said the scene looked like something from a nightmare, and that's exactly what it became. The kids didn't sleep for days. Some woke up shaking. Others clung to their parents, afraid to be left alone. Because once your teacher disappears in front of you, how do you trust anything? That's what Durbin wanted the country to understand. These raids don't just take people. They leave behind trauma. Deep, lasting harm that doesn't show up in any official report. When toddlers have to learn the meaning of fear before they learn how to spell their names, something has gone horribly wrong. What makes this even more chilling is what happened next. For hours, no one knew where Diana was. Not her coworkers, not her students' parents, not her family. She was effectively disappeared. It wasn't until she surfaced in a facility in another state that the truth became clear. The system didn't just want to detain her. It wanted to make her invisible. If not for the video, she might have stayed that way. After a judge reviewed her case, the ruling was blunt. Her detention was illegal. She had done nothing wrong. She had followed every rule. And still, she was dragged out of a daycare without cause. Released hours later, not because DHS corrected itself, but because a court forced them to. Now imagine being one of those parents. Imagine having to walk your child back into that building the next day. Imagine them asking, will the masked people come back? Because that's what the kids wanted to know. Not why it happened. Kids that age don't think in policy terms. They just want to feel safe again. But the truth was even worse. This wasn't an isolated mistake. Operation Midway Blitz had been snatching people off streets, out of cars, even off front porches, most of whom had no criminal background at all. And DHS didn't deny it. They defended it. They said it was necessary. They called it success. S.O. Durbin dug deeper that a federal judge in Illinois reviewed more than 150 cases tied to these raids. What he found destroyed the official narrative completely. Of more than 600 people detained, only a tiny fraction had any record that posed a real public safety concern. Less than 3%. That means 97 out of every 100 people taken were ordinary residents, workers, parents, neighbors, whose only mistake was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you don't have to guess what the wrong place meant. School drop-offs, church parking lots, grocery stores, neighborhood sidewalks, places considered sacred no-go zones for enforcement under previous administrations. Places where children were supposed to be protected, those barriers are gone now. Durbin warned his colleagues, especially the ones who love to preach about liberty, what this actually means. If DHS can storm a daycare today, what stops them from storming your home tomorrow? If masked agents can drag away a preschool teacher without a warrant, what stops them from doing the same to one of your constituents? If officers can point guns at toddlers because someone looked suspicious, how long before they start doing it in your district? That's the part political loyalty can't protect you from. Precedent. Once the government learns it can operate by fear, it doesn't give that power back quietly. But here's where the story gets even darker. After building a reputation for terrorizing Chicago neighborhoods, the same officials responsible for Midway Blitz started exporting their tactics to other cities. Charlotte, North Carolina became the next testing ground. Within days, agents raided a church, a place historically protected from enforcement, and detained at least one U.S. citizen because, in the agent's words, he looked Hispanic. That was enough. Appearance, not conduct, not evidence, became the standard for arrest. The message was clear. If they can do it in Chicago and get away with it, they can do it anywhere. Durbin asked the question no one else wanted to ask. Has DHS become so confident in its power that it now sees civilians, including children, as collateral damage? It's a terrifying thought, but look at the facts. A teacher was snatched from a preschool. A citizen was arrested in a church. Neighborhoods are living in fear of unmarked vans and masked officers. You don't create this kind of climate by accident. You create it when fear becomes policy. And yet, even after everything Miss Diana went through, her first instinct after being released wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. She said she couldn't wait to see her students again. She missed them. She loved them. She wanted to reassure them she was safe. You can only imagine what that moment will feel like. The door opening, the kids running toward her, half crying, half relieved, asking why she left. And the truth is, she didn't. She was taken, but Durbin didn't stop at the emotional impact. He laid out the constitutional danger. How can any lawmaker say they stand for freedom while ignoring the most basic rights their own constituents are supposed to enjoy? How can anyone defend masked officers storming a child care center without a warrant? How does a government claim to protect the nation when it terrorizes communities that pose no threat? The answer is simple. It can't. You can't defend both liberty and unchecked power at the same time. You have to choose. And Durbin forced that choice into the spotlight that he made it clear that the only way to apologize to Miss Diana, and to every child who watched their world collapse that day, is by ending Midway Blitz as fast as possible and rebuilding safety in the spaces that should never have been targeted in the first place. Schools, churches, daycares, homes. These aren't battlegrounds. They are communities. And when a government forgets that distinction, it becomes something people fear, not trust. That Durbin's message wasn't partisan. It was human. A safe nation isn't one where toddlers hide under tables because of federal agents. A safe nation isn't one where teachers disappear without explanation. A safe nation isn't one where neighborhoods become stage sets for political theater. That a safe nation is one where rights are protected before power is exercised, where law enforcement is targeted, not reckless, where families aren't afraid to send their kids to daycare. What happened in Chicago is a warning, a glimpse of what unchecked authority looks like when no one pushes back. And if there's one lesson this story teaches, it's this: silence is not protection. Silence is permission. And communities across the country are done staying silent. If you want more breakdowns that cut through the spin, expose the truth, and help you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, make sure you're subscribed. The stories they try to hide are the ones you need to hear the most.